The security guard's hand was already on my elbow when Victoria slammed the contract folder onto the glass table. Her face had that particular shade of red that comes from equal parts rage and panic. "You leaked the Hartwell proposal," she said. Not a question, an accusation. $50 million, Sloan. $50 million just walked out the door because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. The thing about being accused of something you didn't do is that denial sounds exactly like guilt. So I didn't say anything. I just watched her perfectly manicured finger point toward the exit, watched her lips form the words, "You're done here," watched my entire career dissolve in the reflection of that conference room window. What Victoria didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that my silence wasn't admission, it was calculation. Before we go further into what actually happened that day, I want to mention something. We recently hit our first subscriber milestone, and honestly, that means everything. The goal now is reaching 2,000 subscribers, and if this story resonates with you, if you've ever been the person who got blamed for something bigger than yourself, hitting that subscribe button helps more than you know. Not asking for much, just your support as we grow this community together. Now, let me introduce myself properly. My name is Sloan Westfield, and up until that moment in the conference room, I was the senior contract analyst at at Apex Solutions, one of the top consulting firms in Chicago. 7 years I had been there. Started as a junior associate, worked my way up through late nights, weekend proposals, and more coffee than any human should consume. People always assume that because I made it to senior level by 32, I must have had connections or some privileged path. The truth is simpler and harder than that. I grew up watching my mom work 3 jobs to keep our apartment in South Side Chicago, watched her smile at customers who treated her like she was invisible, watched her count pennies for my school supplies, while never once making me feel like we were struggling. She taught me something more valuable than any MBA program could: how to see people. Really see them. The janitor who worked our floor, the intern who brought coffee, the receptionist who knew everyone's secrets. I learned their names, remembered their kids' birthdays, asked about their lives. Not as strategy, but because my mom taught me that every person carrying a mop or a briefcase is carrying a whole world inside them. That kind of upbringing doesn't make you weak in the corporate world, it makes you dangerous. Because when you can see people, really see them, you notice things others miss. 3 months before Victoria fired me, a new client walked through our doors. Hartwell Industries, a manufacturing giant looking to restructure their entire supply chain operation. The kind of contract that could define a firm's year, maybe even its trajectory. $50 million over 3 years, with possibilities for extension. Everyone wanted a piece of it. Victoria Chen, our VP of Strategic Accounts, practically vibrated with ambition when she called me into her office that morning. "I'm assigning you to the Hartwell deal," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "I need your best work, Sloan. Everything perfect. No mistakes, no delays, and absolutely no information leaves this team. Understood?" I understood more than she meant me to. Victoria had been gunning for partner for 2 years. This contract was her golden ticket, and I was the one she trusted to build it. That trust felt good. It felt earned. The team was small. Me, Victoria, 2 junior analysts named Blake and Jennifer, and our financial consultant, Thomas Reeves. 5 people who knew every detail of the proposal we were building for Hartwell. The work was intricate. Hartwell wanted innovation but needed proven results. They wanted cost reduction but wouldn't sacrifice quality. Our proposal had to thread a dozen needles simultaneously, and I spent weeks crafting language that did exactly that. During those weeks, I noticed Thomas acting strangely. He'd always been the quiet type, brilliant with numbers, awkward with people. But suddenly he was taking calls in stairwells, leaving meetings abruptly, showing up late with weak excuses about traffic or dentist appointments. One evening, around 9 p.m., I was alone in the office, finishing a section on logistics optimization. The floor was dark, except for my desk lamp and the ambient glow from the city below. I got up to refill my water bottle and saw light coming from the copy room. Thomas was there, feeding documents into the scanner. That wasn't unusual, we all scanned things, but the way he kept glancing at the door, the way his hands shook slightly as he collected the pages, that was unusual. I didn't confront him, I just filed the observation away, the way my mom taught me to file away details about regular customers who suddenly seemed nervous or upset. Sometimes information is more valuable when the other person doesn't know you have it. The next day, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked the scanner's history log. We had access to it for document tracking purposes, and technically I wasn't violating any policy. Technically. Thomas had scanned 47 pages the night before, at 9:17 p.m. The timestamp showed he'd sent them to an external email address.
My stomach dropped. I knew what 47 pages meant. That was the exact length of our current Hartwell draft, including the pricing strategy and implementation timeline. I had a choice to make: go to Victoria immediately or dig deeper first. If I went to Victoria with just a scanner log and a suspicious email, Thomas could explain it away. Maybe it was his personal email for working from home. Maybe he had permission I didn't know about. I'd look paranoid at best, accusatory at worst. So I watched, and I waited. Over the next week, Thomas made 3 more late-night scanning sessions. Each time I documented it quietly. I also started paying attention to his calendar, his meeting patterns, the times he seemed most distracted. That's when I noticed the correlation. Every time Thomas had a dentist appointment or personal emergency, Hartwell's competitor, Titanium Group, had activity on their LinkedIn page. New employee announcements, strategy updates, small things that individually meant nothing but together formed a pattern. Titanium Group was also bidding for the Hartwell contract, and Thomas, I was becoming increasingly certain, was feeding them our proposal in real time. The question was why? Thomas made good money, had been with Apex Solutions for 5 years, never showed signs of discontent. People don't commit corporate espionage without a reason. I started researching, using my lunch breaks to dig into public records, social media, anything that might give me insight. That's when I found it. Thomas's sister, Emily Reeves, had been diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma 8 months ago. The medical bills, even with insurance, were astronomical. Thomas had started a GoFundMe that barely made a dent in what was needed. His parents had remortgaged their house. And then, suddenly, 2 months ago, the GoFundMe was closed. Donations exceeded. Emily was getting experimental treatment at a private facility that cost $40,000 per month. Someone had given Thomas money, a lot of it, and corporate espionage pays very well when the contract is worth $50 million. I felt sick, not just because of the betrayal, but because I understood it. If someone I loved was dying, if someone offered me a way to save them, how strong would my principles really be? But understanding didn't change what I had to do. I just had to be smart about how I did it. I didn't go to Victoria. Not yet. Instead, I did something risky. I created a false draft of the Hartwell proposal, kept all the real formatting, all the professional language, but changed key details, inflated our pricing by 15%, altered our implementation timeline to suggest a longer rollout, shifted our innovation strategy to focus on areas where Titanium Group was actually stronger. Then I waited for Thomas to take the bait. It took 3 days. I left the office at 7 p.m. one Thursday, making a show of complaining about exhaustion, about needing a real night's sleep. I drove around the block twice, parked in the garage across the street, and watched our office windows from a coffee shop with a perfect view. At 8:45 p.m., the light in the copy room turned on. Thomas was working late,
again. I'd left the false proposal on my desk, clearly labeled Hartwell Final Draft Confidential. If Thomas was as desperate as I thought he was, if Titanium Group was pressuring him for the finished version, he wouldn't be able to resist. The next morning, I checked the scanner logs, 53 pages, sent to the same external email at 9:02 p.m. He'd taken it. Thomas had just sent Titanium Group a proposal that would make them bid incorrectly, pricing themselves either too high or too low, positioning their strategy in all the wrong places. Now came the hard part. I had evidence of Thomas's espionage, but I also had a problem. If I revealed everything immediately, there was a chance the whole deal would implode anyway. Hartwell might lose faith in our security, might pull out entirely. I needed a way to protect the contract while exposing the leak, and I needed Victoria to never know how close we'd come to disaster, because if she knew, she'd panic, and panic makes people do stupid things. So I made another risky choice. I went to Hartwell directly. Not to the CEO or the procurement team, to their head of security, a former FBI investigator named Angela Wu. I'd built a rapport with her during our preliminary meetings, and I gambled that she'd appreciate a discreet heads-up over a public scandal. I met her at a cafe in Lincoln Park, far from both our offices. "We have a situation," I said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside was everything. The scanner logs, the timeline correlations, the evidence of Thomas's sister's medical treatment and sudden financial windfall, and, most importantly, proof that Titanium Group had received our proposal. Angela's expression didn't change as she read, but her jaw tightened. "You're telling me your competitor has been receiving your drafts for 2 months?" "Had been," I corrected. Past tense. The last thing they received was designed to mislead them. Their bid is going to be wrong. Angela studied me for a long moment. "Why bring this to me instead of your VP?" "Because my VP is ambitious, and ambitious people make this about themselves. They see crisis as career damage. I needed someone who sees crisis as a problem to solve." I paused. "And because Hartwell deserves to know that despite the breach, you're still getting our best work, the real proposal, the one Thomas never touched." That last part was true. I'd been keeping the actual final draft on an encrypted drive, only working on it from home, never leaving it accessible in the office. Thomas had gotten early drafts, but nothing from the last 3 weeks, nothing that mattered. "What do you want from me?" Angela asked. "2 things. First, I want you to verify the breach yourself. Trace Titanium Group's bid development. See if it matches the false information Thomas sent them. Second, I want you to keep this quiet until after the contract is awarded. If this becomes public now, everyone loses." "Except you," Angela said. "You come out looking like the hero who saved the deal." "I come out looking like someone who did her job," I corrected. "The hero part is optional." Angela took the folder. "I look into it. If you're right, we'll handle this appropriately. If you're wrong, if this is some kind of sabotage against a colleague, you'll wish you'd never approached me." Fair enough. 2 weeks later, Hartwell awarded Apex Solutions the $50 million contract. Our proposal had been exactly what they wanted. Titanium Group's bid, according to whispers I heard through industry connections, had been strangely off target, almost like they'd been working from outdated or incorrect information. Victoria was ecstatic. She took the team out for drinks, gave a speech about excellence and dedication, hinted strongly about her upcoming partnership announcement. She thanked me specifically, called me the backbone of the operation, said she couldn't have done it without me. Thomas looked sick the entire time. He barely touched his drink, left early claiming a headache. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt tired and worried because Angela Wu hadn't contacted me since our meeting, and that silence felt ominous. The answer came 3 days after the contract signing. Victoria called an emergency meeting, just the core team. Me, Thomas, Blake, and Jennifer, all sitting around the conference room table looking confused. Victoria's face was pale. Hartwell's security team contacted me this morning. They've found evidence that confidential details about our proposal were accessed by Titanium Group during the bidding process. Everyone's eyes went to everyone else. The confusion was genuine. Blake and Jennifer had no idea what was happening. Thomas looked like he might throw up. I kept my expression neutral. Whatever Angela had discovered, she'd clearly decided to bring it to light. "They're investigating the source of the leak," Victoria continued. "They've assured me the contract isn't in jeopardy, but they need to understand how this happened. They'll be interviewing each of us individually." That's when I made a mistake. Not a big one, but enough. I glanced at Thomas for just a fraction of a second, and Victoria caught it. Her eyes narrowed. The interviews happened over the next 2 days. When my turn came, I was honest. I told them about noticing Thomas's unusual behavior, the scanner logs, my decision to create a false draft. I showed them everything I'd compiled. The investigator, not Angela but a colleague of hers, listened without expression. "Why didn't you report this to your supervisor immediately?" "Because I wasn't certain," I said, "and because making an accusation without being certain would have damaged someone's career, possibly destroyed it. I needed to be sure." "And when you were sure?" "I went to Angela Wu because I trusted her to handle it properly." "Instead of going to Victoria Chen, your direct supervisor?" "Yes." "Why?" I chose my words carefully. Victoria had a significant personal stake in this contract's success. I believed she deserved to celebrate that success without the distraction of a security crisis that I'd already contained. That was diplomatic. The truth was, I didn't trust Victoria not to panic, not to make decisions that would protect her reputation over the integrity of the investigation. The investigator made notes. "Thank you for your cooperation, Miss Westfield." Thomas was fired within a week. Quietly, no announcement, just suddenly not there anymore. The official story was that he'd decided to pursue other opportunities. The real story was a legal settlement that kept him out of prison in exchange for full cooperation and repayment. I thought that was the end of it. I thought we'd move forward, contract secured, lesson learned. I was wrong. Victoria called me into her office on a Friday afternoon, 2 weeks after Thomas's departure. Her expression was strange, tight, controlled. "Close the door," she said. I did. "Hartwell's security team sent me their final report this morning." She tapped the folder on her desk. "Very thorough, very detailed." "That's good," I said carefully. "Is it?" Victoria's voice was cold. "Because the report makes it very clear that you knew about the breach for weeks. Weeks, Sloane, and you didn't tell me." There it was, the real issue. Not that there had been a breach, not that I'd resolved it, but that I'd made decisions without her, that I'd gone over her head. "I was handling it," I said. "You were handling it," Victoria repeated, her voice rising slightly. "You were handling a situation that could have destroyed this contract, destroyed my career, and you decided I didn't need to know?" "The contract was never in jeopardy. I made sure of that." "You made sure." Victoria stood up, her hands flat on the desk. "You're not the VP, Sloane. You're not the one who gets to make those calls. You violated protocol, you violated chain of command, and worst of all, you made me look incompetent to the client." "That wasn't fair, and we both knew it. I made sure the client got what they paid for. That was my job." "Your job is to do what I tell you to do," Victoria said. And there it was, the real issue. Control, authority, the fact that I'd solved a problem without needing her. The argument escalated from there. Victoria accused me of grandstanding, of trying to make her look bad to position myself for advancement. I defended my choices, my methodology, my results. And then she dropped the hammer. "The client may trust you, Sloane, but I don't. Not anymore." The meeting that led to my firing happened 3 days later. Victoria had spent that time building her case, getting legal involved, framing the narrative exactly how she wanted it. The accusation was that I had leaked the Hartwell proposal, not Thomas, me. Because I had created the false draft, I had access to all the information, and I had a relationship with Hartwell's security team that Victoria decided to paint as suspicious. She twisted everything. My diligence became deception. My protection of the contract became manipulation. My silence became guilt. "You leaked the Hartwell proposal," she said in that conference room, with witnesses present, with HR taking notes. $50 million, Sloan. $50 million just walked out the door because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. It was absurd. The contract was already signed. Hartwell was happy. Thomas had been identified and removed. But Victoria needed someone to blame for the breach that had happened on her watch, and she needed that someone to not be her. I could have fought it. Could have called Angela Wu, could have brought in the investigation report, could have made a scene. Instead, I let the security guard escort me out, let Victoria believe she'd won, let the company think I'd been responsible. Because what Victoria didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that I'd recorded our entire argument in her office 3 days earlier. Illinois is a two-party consent state for recordings, but corporate policy allowed recording of any meeting where someone felt they might be subject to disciplinary action. I'd sent myself an email before entering her office documenting my concern. Legal protection. More importantly, Angela Wu had already offered me a position with Hartwell Industries, head of internal security compliance. Significant pay increase, better title, and a direct line to people who valued integrity over ego. But I didn't take that job. Not right away. First, I went to the Illinois Department of Labor and filed a wrongful termination claim. Attached the recording, the investigation report, documentation of Thomas's firing, and a detailed timeline of everything Victoria had done. Then I went to Apex Solutions' board of directors, not with threats, not with demands, but with a simple question. Did you know your VP of Strategic Accounts fired the person who saved your biggest contract in order to cover up her own security failures? The board didn't know. They were very interested to find out. Victoria was asked to resign within a month. The official story was pursuing new opportunities. The real story was a choice between quiet resignation and very public termination. I could have felt vindicated, should have, probably. Instead, I just felt sad. Victoria was brilliant at her job, genuinely talented, but she'd been so focused on climbing the ladder that she forgot the people holding it steady. My mom always said that how you treat people when you don't need them shows who you really are. Victoria treated me like a threat instead of an asset, and that choice cost her everything she'd worked for. I did eventually take the job with Hartwell Industries after the dust settled. Angela Wu became not just a colleague, but a mentor, teaching me the security side of corporate operations with the same intensity she'd once investigated federal cases. The department I built there became a model for the industry, not because we were harsh or punitive, but because we understood something fundamental. Security isn't about locks and surveillance. It's about creating an environment where people don't want to betray the company, where they're valued enough, paid enough, supported enough, that selling secrets becomes unthinkable. Thomas's story stayed with me. A talented analyst driven to betrayal by impossible circumstances. The system failed him long before he failed the company. His sister survived, by the way. The experimental treatment worked. I know because I checked, because I needed to know that some good came from all of it. I've thought a lot about that period of my life, about the choices I made and whether they were right. Going around Victoria was risky. Creating the false proposal could have backfired. Meeting with Angela without authorization violated about a dozen unwritten rules. But those unwritten rules are often designed to protect power structures, not people. And sometimes doing the right thing means breaking rules that shouldn't exist in the first place. 5 years later, I'm now VP of Corporate Integrity at Hartwell Industries.
We've expanded from manufacturing into tech integration, renewable energy systems, and sustainable supply chain development. The company has tripled in size, and every new contract, every new partnership crosses my desk for security review. I still remember everyone's name, still ask about their kids, their lives, their concerns, because my mom was right. Every person is carrying a whole world inside them, and the moment you forget that is the moment you become the person who deserves to be fired. I heard Victoria landed at a smaller firm in Boston, doing well apparently. I hope that's true. I don't hate her. I understand her. She was a product of a system that rewards ruthlessness and punishes vulnerability. Maybe she's learned, maybe she hasn't. Either way, it's not my story to tell anymore. My story is about something else entirely. It's about the moment you realize that doing your job well sometimes means doing it differently than you're told. It's about understanding that loyalty to a person isn't the same as loyalty to what's right. And it's about knowing when to speak up and when to stay silent, and having the wisdom to tell the difference. The younger analysts who work for me now sometimes ask for advice. They want to know how to navigate office politics, how to handle difficult bosses, how to advance their careers without compromising their values. I tell them what my mom told me: see people, really see them, understand their motivations, their fears, their pressures, not to manipulate them, but to work with the reality of who they are, not who you wish they were. I tell them that sometimes the person above you will make decisions based on ego rather than logic, and your job is to protect the work anyway, not for them, but for everyone else who depends on that work being done right. I tell them that documentation is your best friend, not because you should expect betrayal, but because memory is unreliable and truth needs evidence. And I tell them that career advancement built on someone else's downfall is a house made of cards. Real success comes from creating value so undeniable that people want you to rise. Most importantly, I tell them that being fired isn't always failure. Sometimes it's the universe's way of getting you out of a place that was never going to appreciate who you are. The Hartwell contract that started everything is still running, renewed twice now, expanded into new territories. Every quarter when I review the numbers, now over $200 million in total value, I think about that conference room, Victoria's red face, her accusation, the security guard's hand on my elbow. I think about how small I felt in that moment, how powerless. And then I think about how that moment was actually the beginning, not the end. Getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me, not because it was pleasant or fair or justified, but because it forced me to bet on myself in a way I never had before. It made me realize that the people who should value you will, and the ones who don't will always find a reason to diminish you. You can't control that. You can only control your response. My response was to build something better. A department, a philosophy, a way of working that prioritizes people alongside profits. It's not revolutionary, it's just basic human decency applied to corporate structure. But in a world that often forgets basic decency, that's revolutionary enough. If you've made it this far, if this story connected with you in some way, I meant what I said at the beginning. We're building something here, a community of people who understand that work stories aren't just about work. They're about dignity, justice, and finding your way through systems that weren't designed with you in mind. Subscribing helps us reach more people with these stories, helps us grow toward that 2,000 subscriber goal and beyond. The choice is yours, but I hope you'll join us.